Welcome to the Road to Redemption podcast with your host, Cam Williamson. Each week, Cam sets out to shatter the labels and stigmas associated with mental health awareness by giving life lessons and raw overviews of events happening around the world.
All right, what is up, guys? Welcome back to this episode of the Road to Redemption podcast. I am, as always, your grateful host, Cam Williamson. Nailed it, because this is take 2. I just fucked it up. Today, we are talking, as always, non-judgmentally, from my observation, the relationship between a mother and their son, right? I've seen a dynamic. My mother has a daughter, my older sister. So we are going to talk about the relationship I have with my mother and how that has affected things going forward, mental health wise. I've covered my father. I've covered my first love. I plan to talk about marriage. I plan to talk about first time having kids, second time having kids, all these different life situations that are very difficult to talk about because sometimes it forces us to feel things that maybe we haven't in a while or bring up subjects that maybe we never have, but it's all a part of speaking your own truth and telling your story. And again, I always believe in telling everything to the absolute best of your knowledge, and you don't try to exaggerate things and you don't try to make things seem worse or better than they were, but you just tell facts and you try not to give personal informations that could damn anyone or anything like that, or put anyone in any kind of like harassment, danger, or something like that. So it's just want you guys to know those are all things I try to be conscious of. So and the reason I do this episode, one, I've never actually dedicated an entire episode to my relationship with my mom, but also my mom has gone through a lot recently. Our relationship has been, it's rough, right? At points, like any mother-son relationship is. But here's one thing. My mom was the one who always stayed around. So when I talk about all the years of abandonment, when I talk about all the years of like people just leaving with no answers, my mom never did that. Now, there were times where we didn't speak because we didn't agree with one another, or she didn't agree with things I were doing, or I think a lot of the times if we weren't speaking, it was more because my mom knew what I was doing and she knew that she didn't want a window into that. And again, I'm going to get ahead of myself, but so let's start from the beginning. My mother is actually very, it's crazy. People ask me still what my mom does for a living. And I'm like, I don't really know. She does like trades, financial trades for big like billion-dollar companies when they're like trying to get different stuff done to build skyscrapers and shit. Again, I don't understand it at all. But my mom works in she's always worked in a high-rise in Columbus as long as I've been alive. And, my mom has always worked a job on St. Patrick's Day where she counts money in a local pub that our family, was associated with growing up. And again, my mom has always been an extremely hard worker, but she had to be. So I don't know why, and I can only attribute it to my mother's work ethic and who she saw herself as her. My mother always held herself to a standard that she was unwilling to fall below, and I took that when I was like 27, 26, when I made the decision I would never work in a restaurant again. I would never, not saying that it's not okay to work in something like that, but once you've reached a certain point of sacrifice and struggle, and you go, I will never put myself in that position again. Why I have to fucking take somebody's bullshit because I'm their waiter that day. Never in my life will I do that. My mom always made sure that, like, again, it wasn't below her. She bartended and she counted money for a bar. So it was like she just worked hard, but it was always for a purpose, and what she did always made sense. My hustle mentality comes from my mom. From the youngest that I can remember, my mom was always before Gary Vee. So I'm telling you, my mom is the original fucking Gary Vee. My family is. because they would be going into like TJ Maxx's to find the Michael Kors shit, and then they would sell it when eBay was brand new or at yard sales, and they would double, triple the stuff. I'm telling you, they sold longer burger baskets, Pampered Chef stuff. There was like 4 different companies. I mean, it was always something that she genuinely had a passionate interest in. Like with the bar situation, she didn't just count money for a bar. Like I said, my uncles owned a bar, and she was around that, like to be around me when I was around my dad and stuff. So there was always like, she always knew someone. There was a personal relationship. She was helping somebody out because they trusted her. And again, she was always very smart. My mother's very smart. When she was young, she didn't do drugs. She didn't drink. They called her Mary Poppins and stuff. And again, her and my dad were complete opposites. So, and I never knew them together. So my mom, in my first memories, we lived in a small little house in Lincoln Village, which was like north, I think, in Columbus. And it was just her, me, and my sister. And I remember my mom always made sure that things were special. Right? From a very young age, Christmas was always very special. It was hot chocolate on Christmas Eve. She made sure that she did what she could to decorate the house and that it was a special time. This is where we're going to talk about the positive sides of my upbringing. Because again, my mother, whether it was exactly what I needed as a child, let's all admit, we didn't have perfect upbringings. No one did. So we deal with what we have, and that's not invalidating the feelings and the way that things spun out to be behavioral issues, but it's saying you have to give people credit. My mother worked very hard, and when she wasn't working, when I was about 8 or 9, I remember my mom wasn't like doing anything on the weekends anymore. It wasn't like, and again, when I made a good friend and my best friend Griffin, and his parents were responsible for being my babysitter throughout the day, like usually on summers, they were best friends. So when I was hanging out with my best friend Griffin on the weekends, my mom was usually hanging out with his mom, and it was again just this family unit. So my mom didn't go out, and she didn't go drink with her friends. And again, this isn't saying my mom didn't have a life and she didn't occasionally catch, a dinner with friends after work or something. But that wasn't until we were much older. And like, again, we were probably doing our own thing anyway. My mom always, again, tried to make sure that we didn't want for anything. And I think a lot of that and a lot of her frustration, and my mom, again, had I will call my mother's temper a righteous temper, because my mom did not yell often. Unless she had to yell at me, because it's like, yo, you're not listening to me kind of thing. My mother's motto was always, you can feel however you want to feel, but you are still responsible for the way you act, right? And she always tried to ingrain that in my head. And for some reason, she said it like a mantra, and it never stuck in the way of like, yo, when you act crazy in emotional times, you're still going to be responsible for the consequences. People aren't going to really give a fuck that you were just sad at that moment. And that was the complexity of what she was always trying to reiterate to me. And it was the thing I missed the most in life, which is crazy, right? The lesson she always tried to teach me. Now, the basis of who I am, I truly believe, comes from my mother. My mother believes in love. My mother believes in family. My mother believes in doing anything you have to do for the people you love when they need you. I got that 1,000% from my mom. So when things got complicated with my mother, that was later in my life, because she got married again when I was I don't even know. I forget the year, but I think I was like 12 or 13. So again, around the same age. The timeline you guys are seeing that I'm kind of following through, I'm writing a book. So I'm basing the book chapters kind of as I'm continuing on the podcast, that's where I'm pulling these topics from, if you guys can't kind of tell the synchronicity here. So my mom got married when I was 12 or 13 to a guy that was heavily involved in the church that we became a big group with, right? And kind of that was incorporating my mom's life. We went from being secular people where she was hanging out with like Griffin's parents at their bar that they built in their home, and we were like skateboarding outside, or we were home as a family on Saturday nights or at night, right? Like, so the important thing to remember is, for me to mention is, like, I was the kind of kid, I had problems sleeping my whole life. I was terrified at nights. So like I slept with my mother until I was like 12 most nights, because I was fucking just something about laying in a bed at night by myself. Some people think it's because of some past trauma when they thought I had cancer and I had to spend some time in a hospital or something when I was young. But all of it stems to my mother was busy a lot during the day trying to provide. And then when she wasn't, she was with family, like my aunts and my uncles, and we were at my grandparents' house and stuff like that. And that was like the best times of my life, was weekends and holidays with my family when I was with my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles. But again, that all ended about the same time, about when I turned 12, 13, and we had just moved out of my grandparents' house, and some of my aunts and uncles had just moved away, and I had just lost my best friend. A lot of shit happened, right? Like all at one time. It was fucking crazy. So my mom gets remarried, and then she starts to build her life, right? Like, and again, she didn't disregard us. She didn't anything like that, but she genuinely tried to build a life with this man. And they went to these Bible studies, and I went along. It wasn't my sister's thing at all, especially her and a couple of people that she had initially was friends with, and that's what brought us into the church. They kind of stopped being friends, and my sister just kind of hermited herself. So my mom, me, and my stepdad were very involved in the church groups and stuff like that. And my mom and I got very close because of that. Like I said, I played in a Christian rock band. My stepdad and I jammed often in our living room because it was like I had a drum set, he played bass. My mom loved music. Now, again, my mom would usually like be trying to clean the house or some shit, or like, and my sister would be up in her room. That was a usual night in my house from like, you know, a preteen all the way until I left the house. And again, as I got older, they were gone doing shit. They were at Bible studies that I no longer went to, or they were helping clean a church, and like they were very active in their church. So again, my mom was always off doing things to be a better person, grow herself in some way, as she believed was best for her at the time. And she taught us to do the same. Now, when she found God, she did not force it on my sister. She didn't force it on me, but she did stress her beliefs to us, that we knew what she believed, and she still to this day will do that. So when distance really came with my mom is when, again, women got involved, right? So when I started to date women, when I would be heartbroken or when I would be rekindling things, and it would turn into a situation where my mom always genuinely wanted the best for me. And if I can say that anyone warned me legitimately about making actual mistakes as a young kid, I can say my mom definitely tried. Like, you know, she stressed the importance of not fucking around when you're young and getting people pregnant. And we had close family friends that went through that. And again, yes, at the time, 16 and pregnant was like a massive show on TV. But when me and my mom went through the moment of I was 17 telling her I'd just gotten somebody pregnant after I was supposed to be this, I was working to be a youth pastor right before that. Before I had lost my whole, my life came crashing to the ground at the age of like 14. And then I just kind of autopiloted for a couple years. And I don't think my mom and I really connected on much. It was just, we co-lived together. I was always trying to do my thing, and she kind of did what they did. It wasn't any ill intent. There wasn't neglect there. Again, we didn't want for food. It wasn't like we missed meals and shit. There was never anything like that. It was just always, my mom always had a thing that she was doing, a pampered chef party some nights. She wouldn't come home until, later at nights, because she would be out, like, trying to sell pampered chef shit, or, longer burger baskets, or whatever the fuck. But it was like every year when my school would do those catalogs where people would buy like candy and shit from the kids to do a fundraiser so you can get like a fucking inflatable chair or whatever. My mom, guarantee you're going to be number one. Because my mom worked at this skyrise in fucking Columbus, Ohio, and had great relationships with the CEOs and the bosses, and they would just buy us out. They were like, fill the whole fucking page up, hundreds of dollars. And it's like, yo, my mom was a very high standard of expectation person, but she gave you the flexibility to be who you were, which my father did not. And like my grandfather did not. My grandmother did. And my mom's heart comes, I think, a lot from my grandmother, where very family focused, very forgiving, very willing to, again, like me, overlook some things that maybe we shouldn't in people, and it oftentimes leads to them getting hurt, right? So, and that's including with our relationship. My mom, when I was in the pitfalls of my drinking, my mom never enabled me to do anything. Like, she gave me money when she knew what I was going to do with it, probably, but she damn sure convinced herself that I was trying to do the right thing, regardless. Or else she wouldn't have done it. Again, like my mother, especially late in my alcoholism, my mom was always the one that got me into a detox center, put me in a rehab, sent me to the military, and my mom did what she could without having a dad around who was going to guide me. My stepdad knew the complicated relationship with my dad and saw all the different influences I had, and he kind of just respected it in a way that he just stayed out of most things. We would have a couple engagements throughout our life where it was like, yo, stay in your place, and he was like, this house is my fucking place. But very few, and nothing physical, nothing like that. So it was always this weird balance of obviously blending a family now. My sister was always just kind of absent as I got older. So my mom and my sister were always very close. And there would be times when, they would disappear into their room and talk for a while, which was great. And then there would be like certain shopping excursions, or like every Christmas they would go and see the Nutcracker at the ballet thing. And it was like, I was always kind of jealous of those things because my mom and I couldn't do stuff like that. When I was older, she took me like a Cincinnati Reds game, and she took me to Blue Jackets games because her firm that she worked at, they would get tickets and shit, and so we would get like good seats to the Blue Jackets. So my mom would always make sure she did shit like that when she could. Again, I've never told any of these stories about my parents or anything in a way that is to paint them like they were intentionally neglecting us. When my parents were absent, I think they had good intentions. So I'm realizing in my 30s that their absence makes more sense than the pain that I carried around for so long, feeling like it was always me. Sometimes it was, right? Sometimes people just don't have the behavioral or emotional capacity to deal with situations. And again, a lot of times in my family, it was we don't talk about it. We just act like everything's going to be fine. And still to this day, we're probably guilty of that. When life is going to fuck hell and back, our general resort is, hey, we're going to put one foot in front of the other. It is what it is, right? It is exactly what the fuck it is. Me and my mother have this conversation probably daily now. It is what the fuck it is. Whatever life is. And like my mother and I, our most genuine moments, I'm probably going to fucking cry here. Our most genuine moments in our life is when we've had to look at each other. Like, again, my mother was in the room with me when I had to make the decision to hold my stillborn son. My mother was in the room with me when I had a kid at 17. My mother was there when I got married for the first time. She was there when I graduated from basic. Like, she was there when shit happened. But again, a lot of the times just being there, it was us looking at each other going, yo, it is what it is. And like, I knew the complexity of her and my dad's relationship, and I knew the complexity of her and her dad's relationship because I saw it from a very young age. And I saw how loving my mother was because of how hurt people had hurt her. So I never judged my mom when she had to distance herself from me, because I understood at times in my life I made decisions that forced that, because that was maybe the only thing she could do. Where again, when you're 20s, it feels like you're being abandoned to rehab centers, and you're being left in jails, and you're being not supported when people don't know what to say. But then you grow up and life happens, and you have to take weird jobs, and you have to spend time away from your kids a lot more than you think, and you realize why you try to make certain moments so special. But like, a lot of that can get discredited with pain and with perception, right? As you get older, you gain perception that you don't have when you're young. And I think a lot of the times we are so hurt as young kids and young adults because of what our perception of our reality was, right? We can look at situations, right? My mother always was the one that instilled in me respecting women. Again, I grew up with all women in my life. So I had, my grandmother was around all the time, my aunt, Chris, my aunt Marlena, and then they had a brother, Bill, who was not around so much. But again, my aunts and my grandmother and my mother and my sister, that's who I saw the most, like on weekends and holidays. And that was like who, if you asked me who my family was, it was my mother, my sister, my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunts, and those cousins. So the kids they had. That was our tight-knit family until, again, I was about 14. My grandparents moved to north of Columbus, out to the country, and everything kind of again fell to shit. So, and again, I think that was a foundational shift for her too, because we had never known anything other than my grandparents and everyone forming around that all the time. We didn't know anything other than that. So when, I think for the first time, it might have, whether she realized it or whether it was actually a factor, or I'm simplifying a situation or not, it might have been the first time that my mom goes, holy fuck, like, I'm here in Columbus, my parents are gone, they're going, my grandfather retired from the GM union, and my grandmother retired years prior, and it was a thing where it was like, okay, I'm here. Now again, they were only an hour away, but I think it was maybe a first time my mother felt foundational, this is me as an adult standing on my own. She had remarried, her kids were growing up, she was getting into church. That wasn't really my grandparents' thing. She found a new family in that church too. So in that, I started bugging at a young age, as teenagers will do, and I think we were so close when I was so young, and we did bond over the fact that sometimes life was just tough, and sometimes people hurt your feelings, and you're stuck with that, and you just learn to love people anyway. That was always, my mother was always my nurturer. So I don't talk about this a lot either, but like, I was not a popular kid. I was a weird kid. I was a scrawny kid who wasn't great at sports. I could skate okay and whatever, but I never excelled at anything. Nothing. So I was always the reject kid, the outcast kid. So I would come home beat up, like, man, nobody likes me. And it was just because I was trying to be too much for everybody. I was trying to be Jim Carrey, Bam Margera, Steve-O, all these things mixed together, but that's genuinely what I was trying to express as. Like, it was all legit, but it was just always so much for everyone. And my mom, again, would always say, like, Cam, I think your biggest thing is you're the best person to be around and have a good time, but you don't know when to let the good time end. And like that was always a thing, is it was always, I was just always too much for people. And even when I would get, still to this day, if I get in hyper emotional states, my mother, the person who has seen me through my most manic alcoholic states, everything, she'll still go, Cam, I don't know what to say to you right now, because I can clearly tell you're so upset and you're not trying to hear anything that I'm saying. But again, even that is kind of new. That's as I've grown and I've matured in my life, and I've made decisions that have made my mother comfortable in the fact that she doesn't have to worry that I'm going to run off and go on a bender for months, or that I'm going to, do crazy shit and end up in jail or whatever. But that, again, is new. I just had a relapse a year ago. So I just put my family through that again, where I had made them think for almost 5 years that I was good and getting my shit together and whatever. So I've put my mom through a lot as an adult. And remember, she was by my side through every one of my hard times. When I lost kids, when I went through divorces, when I, had my heart broken. And again, all the people that broke my heart and hurt me, they had also hurt her, because she started to create distance from the church group and the family that she had built because of some of the treatment that had happened around me, or at least she felt some pressure to, maybe. So, as things happen, I can tell you that in trying to support me and my sister, life has been very quiet for my mom. She has friends for sure, and she always has people she can talk to, but she's had to sacrifice her whole life for somebody else, so she can take care of somebody else. And, she's always still done her best, and did a good job in my mind to set a standard of making moments and time special with people you care about. We admit, her and I, that we have not been good at that. When things happen in life and we have allowed distance to be created to us, we regret those times greatly, because again, we just lost my grandfather 2 years ago. My mother just had cancer, pancreatic cancer, like 6 to 8 months ago. And then immediately following, she had a hip surgery. And like, again, all this shit, when you start to think about who your parents are, and as they get older, and like, you have to envision losing them or living without them. Because again, I'd never lost anybody crazy impactful to my life until my grandfather passed 2 years ago. And then almost immediately following the morning of that, my mom had cancer. So it was like, what the fuck, man? And I had just stabilized myself, as this, okay, I'm foundational now. I can start to work on myself. And then boom, patriarchy goes down. Boom, my mother goes down. I'm like, what the fuck? And side note, in between those two things, my father, who was living at Hawaii at the time, had fucking fallen down the stairs, cracked his head, fucked himself all up, and they don't know why. It was like a medical episode. So it was like, all these things throughout your family and people you have up and down relationships with, or even the most stable of relationships, it's like you realize how fragile they are by the people who stick around. And my mom has always been around. So I've always been able to appreciate how good family foundation is, because that was important to her and my grandmother and that group. So I carry that with me. A lot of grace, forgiveness, empathy comes from my mother not casting me out when a lot of other people did. And honestly, my mother was the only person in my life who genuinely believed I was a good person with a good heart. Everyone else, I think, thought that I was an asshole and I was trying to hurt people and I was trying to do these things with ill intentions. And my mom was in there day in and day out. And, my mom caught people at my house that claimed they had never been there. And, my mom knew shit about stuff because I was always very honest and like, hey, this is what happened. This is what's going on, just so you know. And she's like, what the fuck? Yo, the cops are here. And it's like, yeah, hey, surprise, we snuck out. Yeah. My mom dealt with that. I just told that story of when I got in trouble at 14 for arson. My mom dealt with that. She was there, and she called my dad and was like, yo, your son's about to go to jail if you don't come get him. My mom was the one who was awoken from sleep to have to deal with that situation. So it was like, you know, you look back, especially at 30, I think it's a pivotal age. You should assess all your relationships in life. And you find the foundational people who mean the most to you. And I don't think that every son's relationship with their mother looks the same, because again, I've never really known a crazy bad relationship between a dude that I know and his mom. Every friend that I ever had, them and their mothers were very close. So there was never like mama's boy jokes. It was always like, yeah, bro, that's your mom. Like, yeah, you first off, you were fucking terrified of your mother. Your mother would give you that scorn that you knew. Like, again, I don't say that I fucked off and did all these things because there weren't going to be ramifications for what I did. It was just my mother would do things like, Cam, you're grounded for 2 weeks. You cannot leave the house. You have to stay in your room and read these textbooks all day during the summer. But I have to go to work. And I don't have anyone who can sit here and make sure you're doing that. So it's like, fucking come on. And it might last a day. But on day and a half, now I'm out in the driveway skateboarding. Day and a half, 2, I'm down the street fucking off. And people know I'm grounded, that I'm not supposed to be out. So they won't let people hang out with me and shit. So now I'm off in another part of the neighborhood doing other shit. And it's like, it was all by my own choice, but it was also by my own freedom. That was involuntary to everyone. So, you know, you live, you grow. I think if you don't have a mother who clearly abandoned you, I understand I have a benefit that I did not have an alcoholic mother. I had a father who drank a lot. I had a grandfather who drank a bit when he was like younger in our lives. But my mom gave up the boozing hard when I was like 9 or 10. And again, you might see her have a Bailey's in her coffee on the weekend or something, but she never boozed. You never saw my mom drunk. I remember seeing my mother fucked up drunk once, maybe tipsy twice, maybe. And again, both I think could be quantified as, I don't know what she was going through at her life during that time, but she was in her maybe late 20s, early 30s, maybe late 30s, whatever during those times. So it's like she's still figuring life out with divorces and custody battles and herself losing friends. And my mother did not date when I was growing up. So there was not guys coming in and out of my house. Never. I met her first boyfriend that I remember when I was, 12, 11, maybe. So again, it didn't happen. It wasn't around me at all. If she was going on dates, I didn't know about it. There was not guys picking her up. There was none of that shit. There was no guys at our house on Christmas. There was never any of that. And, my family didn't put up with that. When you came to my family's house, you didn't just bring your random whatever. You brought people when they meant something to you, and that's it. So, I don't know, man. It was something where, in hindsight now, I can look and see how, I think a lot of the times men who have such strong bonds with their mom, you've really gone through some shit together, you've gone through life together, and you've bonded over the pain of life together, and you've acknowledged it and not just avoided it. I think you have this closeness that you can never share with anyone else. Now, again, that's very different than like the love of your life. That people always try to make this weird connection that like men search for their mothers and their wife. That's not the truth. It's you're searching for nurturing, absolutely. You could have similar characteristics that feel comforting because, again, you're sweet. My mother's a sweet person. You have a kind heart. My mother has a kind heart. But that doesn't mean you're falling in love with your mother and people try to make shit creepy. it's like, yo, I learned things about what feminine, nurturing comfort feels like, and that's foundational to me as a person. So for me to continue to feel comforted and nurtured in my life, I'm going to find similar characteristics, but I'm also going to find things that irritate the fuck out of me, and I'm going to find things that I absolutely will not put up with. So again, there's this weird dynamic where, yes, it directly impacts everything, but it is not directly related whatsoever. It's weird. So with that, let me know if you have a complicated relationship. I would like to start talking to some of you guys, especially those of you that are communicating with me a lot. You're sharing your story with me. If you guys are interested in sharing bits of your story with me, let me know, and maybe we could set up a thing where you guys send in short videos. I'll watch them, and I'll kind of give my 2 cents or something like that. We'll see. Check out the Road to Redemption podcast.com for all the past episodes. Hit up Mad Mental Designs. Check out all the merch that we got going on. And yeah, thumbs up the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. It looks like a bunch of you guys are subscribing now. I appreciate that. Hit the bell. It'll let you know when any of these videos go live as soon as they go live. Love you so much. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.